Program for you today. This is the last program of the spring season. We tried to focus after all the Zoom activity. We tried to bring everybody back into the library. We had Jamie Cosgrove, Jim Finch, the Clean Energy Committee, and now we have Julie Wagner. We snuck in a Zoom one on the Israeli political situation, which, if you're interested, it was a fascinating program. And if you search for Branford Forum on YouTube, it's either the first or the second item that comes up, and you can watch that. Let's see. Today we have Julie Wagner. She is a clinical researcher and professor at the University of Connecticut, where she works on diabetes and factors that influence health outcomes, but her real job is president of the Branford Land Trust, and she's going to speak to us today. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Jan. Well, I can't believe you all are here when it's so beautiful out. I kind of want to encourage you to leave class early and go hit the trails or get back in the garden or whatever it was you were doing today. It's so beautiful out, but thank you for coming to learn more about the Land Trust. And as I look out, I see people who have been active and led the Land Trust for many, many more years than I've been involved. And I'm just incredibly grateful for their support and long-term commitment that makes what I do a little bit easier. And I'm thinking particularly about Joan and Harry and Meg and some other folks, so thank you. I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. The Branford Land Trust acknowledges the people who have called the lands we conserve home. We honor the Totoket and Monunkatuck bands of the Quinnipiac people who were dispossessed of these lands. We pay respect to those who are no longer here, and we celebrate the continuing and future presence of Indigenous people in this region. We're grateful for their stewardship of land, water, plants, and animals over thousands of years. We also recognize other people, past, present, and future, with connections to this land. Those who were enslaved and brought here against their will, those who come for a better life, and still others who flee danger and seek refuge. We vow to protect the land in perpetuity, to foster access to nature for all people, and to help heal our human relationship with the earth. So this is sort of Branford Land Trust 101 for those of you who are new or maybe have been involved for a long time, but only in a particular aspect of it. So let's start at the beginning for those of you who don't know. Now, some of you should really be giving this talk instead of me. So what is a land trust? A land trust is a community-based nonprofit that conserves, manages, and restores land. It could be local, regional, or statewide in scope. It could be urban, suburban, or rural. 93% of U.S. counties have a land trust active. Over 92% make their properties open to the public. They can be all volunteer, or they can be a mixture of volunteer and paid staff. And in Connecticut, we have 169 towns and 115 land trusts. So we have a lot of small land trusts. They constitute about 39,000 members and protect over 62,000 acres in Connecticut. And most of the trusts would like to conserve more land, but are limited by financial resources and human resources. So the Branford Land Trust is 55 years old, which is easy for me to remember because it was incorporated the year I was born, so that makes it really fun. We are an all-volunteer land trust and have been that entire time. And our mission is to preserve and protect open space in Branford and to promote our community's awareness of our diverse natural features. We own more than 1,000 acres and have conservation easements on over 400 more, and I'll talk about what a conservation easement is in a minute. We have over a dozen nature preserves and provide over 30 miles of trails, bridges, and boardwalks that are open to the public. In terms of membership, we have about 640 household or business members, over 100 lifetime members. And to the land trust, membership is important, not because we get to collect membership dues, but because each household or each person who becomes a member demonstrates their support for the importance of open space in Branford. We are nationally accredited by the accreditation board, the Land Trust Alliance, and this is important. It's a ton of work. They're very rigorous standards to meet, but it's important for public trust because it signals that we have sound finances, ethical conduct, responsible governance, and lasting stewardship. It also being accredited allows us to be eligible for certain types of grant funding, or makes us more competitive for certain types of grant funding. So how does land come under our protection? Well, the one thing I'd like to start off by saying is that the land trust conserves land in perpetuity. So we don't conserve it for 10 or 20 years. We conserve it for the life of our organization and have plans in place so that if at some point the land trust were to ever dissolve, the land would go to a responsible owner like the Nature Conservancy and so forth. So it's really the idea of conserving in perpetuity. So land comes to us by donation. Some people just give us their land, or people inherit land and don't want to take care of it, and so give it to us. This was probably true more so in the founding days than it is today. We don't get as many land donations as we used to. And there are tax benefits for doing that. Land might come to us through a bargain sale. So a landowner sells the land to us, but for less than its fair market value. And that also has tax benefits for the seller. We might buy it at fair market value just because it has a lot of conservation value, and so we're willing to pay fair market value. An open space set aside. So for certain types of residential developments, the developer is legally bound to set aside a certain amount of that land and to conserve it. And it could be conserved by the town, by a homeowners association, or by us. But often in Branford, the set aside will come to us. Land can also be protected by a conservation easement. So the landowner continues to own the land, but we purchase the development rights to that, and they have tax benefits for that as well. So that they continue to own and use the land, but it's not going to be developed. And all of this is often done in partnerships with the town and with the state. So that's one thing that I kind of want to highlight in future slides, is all these different partnerships that come together. So how do we get our funding? Well, our membership dues, although it's not the bulk of our funding, but certainly membership dues. And other than memberships, membership is the only, what am I trying to say? The only regular fundraising we do. Otherwise, if we ask for fundraising, if we're doing fundraising, it's because we have a specific project with a specific amount of money that we need. And often it's almost always land acquisition. So you don't hear from us like you hear from public radio, where like a quarterly fundraiser or whatever. We don't do that. When there's a project that we really need to fundraise for, that's when you hear from us. Donations of cash or stock, bequests, grants. We do a lot of grant writing, which is a lot of work for an all-volunteer board. And we're starting to think maybe about some other options that we haven't used in the past. So as you know, the real estate market is, things are expensive and move quickly, and we have to be really nimble. So there are things, there's an option that I don't think we've ever used it, but having a conservation buyer, so someone who will buy a property and hold it for us to be able to raise the money. A conservation loan through an organization that's specifically designed to give loans to land trusts at subprime rates, or the bank, borrowing money from the bank if we really need to get some cash to acquire some land. This is a long history of conservation and open space in Branford. There's this beautiful graphic, I'm not sure who made it, but there's this beautiful graphic describing it. I wish it started before 1699, because I can tell you the people who lived here before 1699 did a really good job of managing open space. But anyway, it starts at 1699. The land trust was founded in 1967 by town leaders and Branford citizens. In 1968, we got the Jarvis Creek Preserve, and the reason I'm highlighting that is because it was a partnership with an anonymous donor, the Branford Land Trust, and a group of citizens in Stony Creek who formed a partnership to acquire property and donate it to the land trust. Over in 1978, we got the Van Wee Preserve. The Van Wees were a local family. You probably know that name if you've lived in Branford. This was, I think this was Alice and Bill Van Wee. And this is Lucy Hammer, who also dedicated quite a few acres to the land trust, and she's there with Lauren Brown, who's currently on our board right now. But these were some key donors in the early days. And moving on, Beacon Hill, I've highlighted this one because this was a partnership between the state, the town, the land trust, and there was actually, as I understand it, there was a referendum. So the town actually voted whether or not to spend town money on Beacon Hill. So that's another way that land was acquired. In 2002, the Select Committee on Open Space Acquisition was established to advise the first selectman about what properties should be prioritized for open space. In 2006, the Queech property was acquired by the town with a lot of support from the Branford Land Trust. And the reason I highlighted that is because there was so much citizen involvement in opposing proposed development there. So a lot of the lands that are open in Branford right now are open because of the citizens, the land trust, the town, the state, all working in cooperation. Our most recent acquisition, which you probably know about, is Jarvis Creek Farm. So this is 146, that's Stony Creek in Long Island Sound. This was Medlin Farm, the cornfield on Medlin Farm. And he put the property up for sale. And we did some fundraising. You probably heard from us during that time. And we're able to acquire it and add it to the Jarvis Creek Preserve. And it's important for many reasons, not the least of which are just these beautiful viewscapes for 146 and the trail connectivity. So you're really able to walk through Stony Creek, across Jarvis Creek, across 146, over to Hoadley Creek. I mean, the connectivity is really amazing. It's said that anywhere you are in Branford, you're no more than 5 minutes from a trailhead. I've never actually tested that, but that's what I've heard. So this is just something we're really proud of. Now, this is an old map, and there are certain land trust people who, if they knew I was showing this map, they'd get mad because it's not updated enough. But this is an old open space map that shows a little bit of what's been conserved in Branford. So the Branford Land Trust is in blue, as you can see. The town is in green. The Regional Water Authority is all that purple up there along Lake Saltonstall. The state and federal is yellow, private is orange, and farming is pale green. You can see a little bit of it sort of like up at maybe 1230 up there in the corner there. So that's about how Branford is looking. But that's a lot of land to take. Once you acquire it, you have to manage it. It's a lot to take care of. And so we do stewardship of the lands and annual property monitoring. So once a year, we have boots on the ground on every parcel. People volunteer to go out and they monitor for things like invasive plants, for encroachments. So maybe someone's dumping or cutting down their trees or building a shed or whatever on property, any other issues. And then they write up a summary and that gets stored, and then the property management committee takes care of any of those encroachments. But this annual property monitoring is really important, and it's important for accreditation. So this is just a nod of the nod of my head to all the monitors that make this possible. If you're interested in being a monitor, we have a training every year to teach you how to use the mapping program on your phone and so forth to do a good monitor. Okay. Trail and field maintenance, also a lot of work. These guys, Gordon's the vice president of Land Trust, and he's been a member of the Trails crew for many years. So these guys go out, and I say guys, it's now all guys, although it has been both men and women in the past. Go out twice a week, every week, unless it's really foul weather. And they do things like they blow down trees off of the trails, they clear invasives, they build raised boardwalks and bridges to keep the trails open. And this is just so cool. I want to show you this. Is it not going to let me do it? Oh, here we go. Okay, so this is something that Gordon could talk about much more intelligently than I can. But this is apparently an Alaska chainsaw. So when a tree goes down on the trail, the crew goes out and they can mill it on site and then use those planks for bridges and boardwalks. It's very cool. So we're actually getting, that was a budget item this year, was a new Alaska chainsaw, because this one was actually owned by the head of the Trails crew. And we really need to have our own. We can't be relying on people to donate that kind of equipment. And we're planning this year for our first handicap accessible trail. So that's something, part of our mission is really keeping, making equitable access to nature for all. So in the last couple of years, we've acquired the Todd's Hill Wet Meadow Preserve, which is just north of 95. It's the old Cosgrove estate. It has these two beautiful ponds and old trees, lots of wildlife. It's just gorgeous. But it's one of our only properties that's relatively flat. That's not salt marsh. So we applied for a grant and got a planning grant to plan a handicap accessible trail there, which is exciting. That'll be the first one for us. The Trails crew also keeps 9 old fields open. And this is important because if you don't keep a field mowed, you'll get succession of the trees and it will become forest land. And there's no problem with forest land, but certain species, particularly certain grass-loving birds and small mammals, need open grasslands, and that's a habitat that's really reduced in Connecticut. So we try to keep some of the fields open. The field crew uses tractors and a billy goat and a brush cutter, paying attention to the frequency and the timing of when to cut so as not to disturb the wildlife or the foliage, hazards like rocks and slopes and weather and so forth. They maintain the equipment and they have safety training. And so Gordon was just showing me pictures on his phone yesterday going to the chainsaw safety training yesterday. Okay. We also have monthly work parties. So these are individuals, it's often in conjunction with the town, parks and open space, and sometimes local businesses will come out one Saturday a month to go and clean up a particular property. And so this is an example of a work party and some of the special tools that can get used at a work party. I was talking about Todd's Hill. These are more pictures of the Todd's Hill Wet Meadow Preserve. And here we're working with the town commissions to, well, first of all, to take invasive species out of the pond. So there was actually a water plant that was invasive, and so they got out in boats and have been taking the plant out. And then also doing some test plots to solarize, to remove the sod and add some pollinator plantings to promote bees and butterflies and other kinds of pollinators. So some of the work that we do is in conjunction with the folks who really have the expertise about the flora and fauna and can help us figure out what to do with some of our properties. We also, in the last 2 years, started the Native Plant Protection Corps. And so this is a group of people who are trying to protect. I was out yesterday walking on, behind Young's Pond, and I saw Jack in the Pulpit. I was so excited. I was like, Jack in the Pulpit. It was so great. So these native plants, and particularly wildflowers that need protection, when we see that there's a place that they're growing and they're being threatened by a manageable, potentially manageable patch of invasives, the Corps will go out and remove the Japanese knotweed, or the garlic mustard, the autumn olive, multiflora rose, mugwort, fig buttercup, you name it, right? They're all up there. So this is an attempt to sort of save some of the native plants and wildflowers. Okay. The land trust properties house about 40 osprey stands. So when you see the ospreys come back in the spring and you're happy because they're nesting, it's often because the nest is on one of our properties. It's actually a citizen group who builds the stands, but if they need help, we have a board liaison who gets land trust people together to go and help with those osprey stands. And given that at their lowest, this is what I've heard from a biologist, that there were only 9 nesting pair of osprey in Connecticut. And then, of course, the laws about DDT changed, people became aware, the stands were built and so forth, and you know now we have plenty of osprey. I mean, there's tons of osprey here now. And it's just a really great example of what can happen when there are efforts at conservation. Okay. We also know that youth are the future of land conservation. And so over the years, we've worked with different scout groups and schools and church groups. Right now, we have a partnership with the Peabody Evolutions program out of the Yale Peabody Museum. And it's an after-school program for kids in the greater New Haven area. And it's STEM and college prep and college support, but they're not getting much in terms of the natural sciences. So we've partnered with them through a grant from the Pell's Charitable Trust to have the kids come out of the library or out of the museum and have outdoor experiences, learn about land conservation, learn about the indigenous history of the area and so forth. So this is a project that is fun and exciting. These are some of the field trips they've done, so taking a hike. Here they're doing what's called forest bathing. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a Japanese practice of paying attention to the 5 senses while you're in nature. So they got to do that. They've done a bunch of things, including, they did the doors of Branford, that nice celebration on the green. They painted a door for us, which was really beautiful. And they made us this super cool video.
Since 1967, the Branford Land Trust has come to protect almost 1,500 acres of land in Branford, Connecticut.
Great-grandfather owned the property
protect waterways, rainwater, salt marshes that buffer against climate impacts, as well as forests and meadows that provide critical habitat for plants and animals. Land comes under our protection through purchase, conservation easements, and generous donations from Branford families.
We gave the bond to the Branford Land Trust with the thought that after we are no longer here, the Land Trust will have the pond and will be assured that the pond will be in good hands and will always be maintained properly.
We promote public access. Our volunteers have built and maintained over 30 miles of trails, bridges, and boardwalks that are open to the public.
When William was young, putting him in the backpack and going hiking with him and having him just engaging very quiet sounds in the forest or the leaves falling. And beautiful pictures of him in the autumn. When he's probably 6 months old, on Kyle's back with the leaves falling all around him, and he's just observing them. Like from the time that children are very, very little, that level of stimulation, just being in the forest, is perfect for their developing brains.
We connect people to the land through guided hikes, educational programs, a children's day camp, and an environmental lecture series. We connect people to each other. The volunteers build friendships when they gather to clear trails, plant for pollinators, maintain osprey platforms, and write articles for our newsletter.
Nature's very important. I mean, I like, being in the city, but it's nice to get out where it's quiet and you can think and not have, just, get to know yourself and relax and reset yourself.
Our all-volunteer organization is supported by over 1,000 diverse community members. Won't you join us? Connect with the land. Connect with us.
So I think that's a pretty awesome video. And these high school kids did it for us. It's wonderful. Education and outreach, we have a lot of programming, lots of walks, animal tracking classes, bird walks, foliage walks, a horseshoe crab program. We've also had about 900 children so far go through our Children's Environmental Day Camp, which is a day of hands-on activities focused on Long Island Sound. So here's a wildflower walk, people enjoying that. There's some pictures of the day camp, the kids at the camp doing touch tanks and really getting out there and getting their feet and hands wet. We have a speaker series. Some topics recently have been bees and pollinators, Long Island Sound, fish ladders, soil health. We had over Zoom at the height of the pandemic, a cooking class online with locally sourced ingredients. Apparently that was one of the highest attended events we've had. We also started this year a film series, and we invited Clan Mother Sharan Piper from the Golden Hill Pogwesets to come and lead a discussion about a series of film shorts on Afro-Indigenous relationships to land. We're hoping to cultivate a relationship with her. We also recently got published in a book, which we have for sale in the back of the room. And you're welcome to see Gordon if that's of interest to you. So Writing the Land is a nonprofit project to connect local artistic and conservation communities together. So we worked with the Branford Arts and Cultural Alliance, or BACA, to put this chapter together, and it includes poetry and artwork that are inspired by conserved lands in Branford. So I encourage you to take a look in the back of the room, and that was made possible by a grant through the Deirdre Baker Schiffer Fund. This is some pictures from the book launch that we had at the Baca Gallery, which was really a lot of fun. We had wine and cheese and music and poetry readings, and it was really lovely. We try to be out and be a presence in the community. So we're there at the Branford Festival every year. We're there for Earth Day. Again, thanks to Gordon, we're there for Earth Day, doing cleanups and this kind of stuff. Really just trying to be out there and raise awareness about what a special place we have here in Branford and all the beauty we have to conserve. And sometimes we're not working. Sometimes we just get together to celebrate. So this was a celebration of Bill Horn. I don't have a laser pointer, but most of you or many of you probably know who he is. And last year, the Connecticut Land Conservation Council, so this is the statewide umbrella organization for land trusts, awarded Bill with the 2022 Excellence in Conservation Award. There's one of those given every year, so that was really a high honor. So we got together, we had music, we had dignitaries, it was really quite something. And we try to let people know about all of this, right? So we have people who do publicity for us. And when I say people, I mean these are like busy people with jobs and families and everything else who volunteer their time to do this. Including the publicity. So we get regular e-blasts and press releases, a website, Facebook, newsletter. All of that content is supplied by volunteers. So if you're an artist or a photographer or a poet or want to write an article about a trail that you've walked, we would love to have it show up in the newsletter and on the website. Most people aren't necessarily aware that we also have buildings. We don't take land with buildings typically because they're a little bit of a liability for us. But this is our headquarters. So this is 26 School Street in Stony Creek. And we received it in the 80s from the town. It was a gift of the town. There was not an endowment, and so there's a lot of work to do to maintain an old building. And so we, in the last couple of years, have started paying much more attention to these buildings. And the mission is energy efficiency, structure and safety, and historic preservation. And this year we got grants from the State Historic Preservation Office and from the 1772 Foundation to do some of the historic restoration and really maintain the structural integrity of these buildings. So what you can see here is that from right to left, you have the schoolhouse, a one-room schoolhouse from 1865. That's where our board meetings typically are and our events and so forth. There's a little connector building that connects it to a firehouse from 1901. And apparently, what I have heard is that there was a tragic fire in Stony Creek, and so they wanted to have a bigger fire truck to have more firefighting capacity, and so in 1952, they built a larger garage on the end. So this complex of buildings is altogether just called Land Trust House and needs a lot of work. So in terms of energy efficiency, we need to take the old oil boilers out and replace them with heat pumps. The wiring is unsafe and not to code. There's some deterioration on the outside. We also have a cesspool that really needs to be replaced with a septic system. So all of this is going to be replaced. And for the first time that I'm aware of, people actually got underneath the crawl space. Yeah, I see people with old houses going, oh my God, you did what? Yeah, exactly. So these are our volunteers under there trying to assess what's going on under the building. And if you have an old house, you won't be surprised to know that it wasn't pretty. And so there's work that needs to be done under there as well to really shore up the whole building. And this is the historic preservation aspect. I mean, this is the 1901 fire headquarters and the schoolhouse where you still see the two separate doors, one for the boys and one for the girls to go in. I mean, these buildings were part of what helped Stony Creek be designated as an official historic district So as much as you may look at some of these pictures and go, just tear it down and start over, these are historic buildings that really deserve to be preserved for the community, not just for us. And it's a lot of manpower. It's a lot of volunteer time. So this is just a picture of a board meeting that was happening during COVID. So we met outside during the height of the pandemic at Foot Park. And just lots of people getting together to plan and to work hard. And to me, this is really what the Land Trust is about. I mean, yes, of course it's about the land. Of course it is. But it's the people who make the Land Trust. I mean, these are some of the most dedicated, hardworking, big-hearted, smart, amazing people. I love the Land Trust. I love these people. They're amazing. I love working with them. So in the larger context, you may have heard of 30 by 30, which is President Biden's goal to conserve 30% of land and fresh water in the United States by 2030, to reverse biodiversity decline, and to address climate, and to increase access to nature for communities that historically have lacked it. A lot of people say that's not enough, 30 by 30. And there is a movement called Half Earth. So people like E.O. Wilson, who are some of the leading, smartest people of my mother's generation, are saying that's not enough. It's really got to be 50%. So Half Earth is a global goal to protect half of the land and seas from human development and to reverse the species extinction crisis and ensure the long-term health of the planet. So if you would like to volunteer, we have many volunteer needs. We have our volunteer coordinator here. If you're interested, that's Joan Merrick. If you're interested in finding out more about volunteering, these are just some of the things that we have needs for, and we would love to have you involved. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions, although I'll probably defer most of them to to my other colleagues in the audience. So thank you.
Anybody have some questions?
The saw, Blackstone saw. What does that run?
What does it, is it, in terms of like, what's the fuel? The Alaska chainsaw, what's the fuel?
Oh, it's a chainsaw mill. You have to go on YouTube to explain it, but you take the top lever of the board. The one we have there was a 100-year-old conifer, and hammer preserve fell down in a windstorm. And so you take the top level off by leveling a piece of equipment, and then once it's level, then you can fit this chainsaw that just glides along the top. And you set it for whatever depth you want. In our case, it's 2 inches. So we make 2-inch planks. And the chainsaw fits in there sideways. So the chainsaw is cutting parallel to the board. And it just goes all the way down. So we make 10 and 12-foot length boards out of the conifer. We got about 6 or 8 boards out of that conifer.
Does it run on gasoline? What does it run
runs
on?
on just a 2-cycle engine fuel.
2-cycle engine fuel.
Is there any possibility of getting an electrical?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Right.
Do they make electric ones?
The electric chainsaws are now available. We don't have one. I was just at the chainsaw safety course. It turns out the safety equipment, particularly the chaps, are not electric chainsaw rated because they don't have variable speeds and no clutch. So they can't be jammed the way a gasoline one was. Without going into great detail, the way you protect yourself is wearing chaps when you're using chainsaws. And the way those work is that if they cut into the chap, a bunch of threads come out and jam the chainsaw. Well, an electric chainsaw has no clutch and it wouldn't jam, it would just keep cutting. So they're actually more dangerous for the chainsaw than a gasoline. So we don't have a big electric chainsaw.
So So we're in early days.
We're in the early days of converting.
Someone should be working on that technology.
The pollution with small engines, two-cycle small engines is significant.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in our local area, what are the biggest barriers to achieving the 30 by 30 vision?
So I'll say we're close, Branford specifically is close to 30. We're not there yet, and I, as a president of the land trust, would say 30 isn't enough. I mean, there's always a tension in the town, in any area between development and conservation, and that's totally understandable and normal. My job is to promote the conservation. The barriers would be the just incredibly high development pressure, I think. I mean, living along the Connecticut shoreline, the density of the housing, the advancing sea, high property prices. So there are properties that we'd be very interested in, but they are outrageously expensive. And I don't mean that we couldn't raise the money. What I mean is that they're not, the conservation value exceeds the fair market value. So when we apply for funding, or when we go for accreditation, we have to show that we have not paid more than fair market value for any particular property. We can't do it. We can't get government funding for it. We can't stay accredited if we do that. But you know what it's like. I mean, people have deep pockets and are willing to swoop in and buy up property. And so it's really a challenge with the high density, the pressure, and the sort of false prices of properties that we just can't compete with. I'm looking at Meg and Joan and Harry, and you guys do acquisitions. I mean, do you have other things to say about that? Or?
It's just impossible.
Yeah.
It seems impossible, but we could.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we can probably raise the money,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not allowed to spend that kind of money. So. Mm-hmm.
What is your operating budget? And how much of that comes from fundraising or grants, or what?
Yep.
How do you fund yourself?
Good question. So our assets are quite high because like 93% of our assets are land held for conservation. So, I mean, our assets are roughly like $14 million or something like that. That is not our annual operating budget, however. I mean, I think our annual operating budget is way less than $100,000 a year. I mean, probably less than 50 in a typical year. This year's very different because of the work on the buildings. The grants that we got are reimbursement grants. So we have to pay for the work up front and then give the state the invoices and we'll get reimbursed. So this year we're spending out a lot more money of our reserves than we normally would. So this year it's higher, but in a typical year I don't know, 50,000? Yeah, 40-ish. So not a lot. And that's mostly for professional services, so legal services, environmental services, paying for sometimes when there's trees that are too dangerous for our crew to do and we need to hire a professional, or fields that are too big for them to mow, and so we have to hire someone to come in and mow it. Publicity. Surveys. Oh, yes, paying. So before we can acquire a property, we have to have an environmental assessment. We have to have a survey. We have to have a title search. We have to do all of that background work. So it's those kinds of expenses. It's just doing the work. Yeah.
And where does the money come from?
Membership dues, donations, and for specific projects, if it's like land acquisition, we can write grants for that. But it's basically donations. And we've been incredibly humbled by, people show up. People show up sometimes with money and care about the environment and care about the town and care about conserving land. And so people are, when there's a specific need, our experience has been that people will step up. Yeah. Yes. So they came to us at, we paid $10 for them, and we're selling them for $20. So there's a $10 profit for us in doing that, yes. And it just goes to our general fund.
Julie, what's the land trust relation to the Shoreline Greenway Trail?
So it's a separate entity. There's, the White Blaze Trail, which is the walk around Branford, which crosses private land, town land, land trust land, whatever. And then there's the Shoreline Greenway Trail, and it's just a different organization, and they do their thing.
There's no overlap in terms of the development rights or the easements to get across properties?
We haven't been too involved in what they're doing. So, I mean, in large part because it's a paved trail. And so it's just not, even for our handicap accessible trail, it won't be a paved trail. So, yeah. Much of it, yeah. Yeah. Well, because it's a different kind of use. It's designed for bicycles, rollerblades, strollers, those kinds of things. And so it's just it's designed for a different kind of user. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have a specific property in your crosshairs right now?
We always have properties in our crosshairs, yeah, absolutely.
There's not one property that will tie it all together?
Well, there are key properties, and there's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of waiting. And really, getting to know landowners and getting to understand what their motivations are and what their vision is for their property, and
so cultivating a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions?
And I can stay after, and these guys, I'm sure, would be willing to answer other questions. Yeah.
So speak up,
you're having an annual meeting here next week.
Yes.
Do you have other regularly scheduled meetings, or is it more like committees?
So we have a monthly board meeting, which are open. So like if any of you ever want to come and sit in on a board meeting, you can do that. I mean, sometimes we need to go into executive session for certain things, but yeah, the board meetings are open, and that's the third Monday of every month at 7 o'clock. It's on Zoom in the winter, and it's outdoors in the summer. Hopefully at some point when we can go back in Land Trust House, they'll be back at Land Trust House. And the rest of the work is all done by committee, and they have their own schedules of when they meet. These guys, the Trails Committee, they have their meetings at Thimble Island Brewery once a month.
And
so,
accreditation, how long is that good for? How often do you have to?
It's a 5-year cycle. So we're entering re-accreditation this year. So that's another unusual expense. You have to pay for accreditation. So this year not pay for pay for the process. So yeah, 5 years. And after you're accredited 3 times, then the 4th time it gets extended to 7 years. But it's a huge lift for an all-volunteer organization. The burden of record keeping and documentation for everything is incredible. So that's going to be a lot of work this year.
If I understand your question, there's also a lecture series that usually happens between January and May. When nothing else is going on, there are often evening lecture series. It hasn't, with COVID, it's slowed down. and we're beginning to rejuvenate it now.
Yeah. There's a lot of programming, so walks, lecture series, those kinds of things. We have, just this month, we have Saturday and Sunday of Mother's Day, we have 2 bird walks in the morning. We have a mountain laurel walk at the end of the month. We have the annual meeting. If you go to BranfordLandTrust.org, the upcoming events will be listed there. And yeah, come. You don't have to be a member. You can just come do stuff.
So, you had a question?
It's more observation. There's conserved land versus developed land. I see living in a neighborhood with conserved land being value added. It is being value added, and it's less traffic, there's less noise, you get an opportunity for more recreation. Do people think like that, or are they like, well, we need more condos, we need more businesses, we need more strip malls?
I think it's fair to say there's always a tension between conservation and development, and I think often what gets brought up is the tax base. So if we have more houses and more condos and more businesses, then there's more tax base there. I think that's the fundamental struggle, and the argument, one of the many arguments to that, I think, is that the property values themselves are higher the more that you have conserved land around, and so the tax base is higher because of that. As well as, you know, health benefits and mental health benefits and other species and, you know, all of the other things that conservationists think about. I don't hear anybody saying, oh, we need more strip malls, but there's more condos just went up, just north of 95. They're going up now. So yeah, somebody thinks we need more housing, more condos. And when you enter into that, I don't want to take too much time, Dan, but I know that there's often a land conservation and affordable housing are pitted against each other when in fact they don't need to be pitted against each other. I think there's a lot of actual overlap in ways that land conservation and affordable housing can. I mean, I can tell you my opinion on some of this stuff, but that's not an official land trust position, so I can talk to you afterwards about it. But
isn't affordable housing and condos, those are actually better than single-family homes with large lawns, right? You get more people into a smaller footprint, so.
The density of housing, that can be, I live in a condominium, and part of the reason my husband wants to stay there is for exactly that, because we have 45 units, we have 3 buildings of 15 units, and you know, it's more energy efficient to live to a connected house, and then there's a larger shared green space. Yeah, absolutely. So
It seems to be a manufacturing conflict.
I would tend to agree. Yeah, I would tend to agree.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Let's
Thank you.